पुढचं युनिट कव्हर करूया आणि ते म्हणजे रेग्युलेशन ऑफ ब्रीदिंग. आपण ब्रीदिंग मेकॅनिझम शिकलेलो आहोत. ब्रीदिंग मेकॅनिझममध्ये इन्स्पिरेशन आणि एक्सपिरेशन कसं घडतं आणि त्याला थोरॅसिक केजचे कोणते कंपोनेंट्स मदत करतात ते आपला पाठ झालेला आहे. उदाहरणार्थ इंटरकॉस्टल मसल्स, स्टर्नम, रिब्स आणि मग डायाफ्रॅगम हे असिस्ट करणारे कंपोनंट्स आहेत ब्रीदिंगसाठी. आणि त्यामुळे थोरॅसिक व्हॉल्यूम वाढणं म्हणजे इन्क्रीज होणं आणि थोरॅसिक व्हॉल्यूम डिक्रीज होणं आणि त्याच्यावरती मग लंगचं जे प्रेशर आहे ते इन्क्रीज होणं आणि डिक्रीज होणं अवलंबून राहतं. आणि मग त्या योगे इन्स्पिरेशन आणि एक्सपिरेशन प्रोसेस घडून येते. हे आपण शिकलेलो. आता ते आपलं पूर्वज्ञान आहे, प्रिव्हियस नॉलेज आहे असं समजून आपण ते इन्स्पिरेशन आणि एक्सपिरेशन रेग्युलेट कसं होतं बॉडीमध्ये, ह्युमन बॉडीमध्ये, ते आपल्याला शिकायचं. तर पाहूया आपण रेग्युलेशन ऑफ ब्रीदिंग. नाव फॉर युअर इन्फॉर्मेशन, ह्युमन अडल्ट breathe about 12 times per minute. 12 times per minute. Remember these figures because these figures will be asked in MCQ. So adult breathing rate is 12 times per minute, whereas newborn baby breathe about 44 times per minute. So there is a higher rate of breathing in a newborn as compared to adult. So this breathing process is involuntary process. Now what is meant by involuntary? Involuntary, that means the function that is not taking place as per our will. It is going on inside our body and it is a steady process continuously going on. That's why it is called as involuntary process. Clear? This involuntary process or breathing is studied under two headings. One is nervous control and second is chemical control, or it is controlled by two ways, one by neurons and other by chemicals. How it is controlled by neurons and how it is controlled by chemicals, we'll see one by one. At first, nervous control of breathing. Now, central nervous system. Now, I have drawn figure here from textbook. Now, you can see in textbook also. The nervous system contains two major organs known as pons varola and medulla oblongata. For your information, because we have to learn nervous control in the next topic. Prior to that, I will give certain information about central nervous system. Central nervous system include three parts: forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Again, each and every part contains their own regions. Specifically, the hind region shows pons varola and medulla oblongata because we are related to these organs now. So pons varola and medulla oblongata, these are the regions of hindbrain and they bring about steady rate and depth of respiration. They control steady rate and depth of respiration. These particularly pons morula and medulla oblongata. And hence, these pons and medulla, they are called as respiratory centers. You can see here, respiratory centers or RC. So, central nervous system containing pons morula and medulla oblongata, they control steady rate and depth of respiration. Hence, they are known as respiratory centers. Clear? Now, these respiratory centers, they are divided into 3 groups. Total 3 groups. That means, now you are familiar, brain is made up of multipolar neurons. So, these regions, they are totally made up of multipolar neurons, and some groups are present inside these pons and medulla, and they are classified as dorsal group of neurons. It is also known as DRG, dorsal group of neurons. Clear? Secondly, second group is present ventrolaterally. Ventrolateral neurons. It is also known as VRG. So, dorsal group of neurons and ventrolateral groups of neuron, they are named specifically because this is present on the dorsal surface of these pons and medulla. Ventrolateral neurons are present on ventral and lateral surface of both these respiratory centers. And third one is pneumotaxic center. Pneumotaxic center. Right? Especially, dorsal group of neuron is present on medulla. Then, this ventrolateral group is also present on medulla. But pneumotaxic center is present on pons. Pons morula. Clear? So, now you are clarified. This DRG is present in medulla dorsally. This VRG is present on medulla ventrolaterally. And pneumotaxic center is present in pons region of brain. Clear? This dorsal group of neuron is responsible, or it is controlling inspiratory center, or it is inspiratory center. It is inspiratory center. Whereas ventrolateral group is expiratory. But in our book, in addition, they are given inspiratory also center. Expiratory, but in our book, to some extent, it also controls inspiration. That's why inspiratory center. Now, pneumotaxic central of pons, actually, it limits inspiration. It limits inspiration. That means how much extent the inspiration should be there. That means stretching of lungs. Then slows wave sleep. Slows wave sleep. And third function is rapid eye movement in sleep. And rapid eye movement in sleep. So now you are maybe familiar, when we go under sleep, the rapid eye movement takes place and we undergoes the deep sleep, right? So the slowing wave of sleep and rapid eye movement of sleep is under the control of these pons. Clear? Now how this process occur actually? But prior going to that process, remember one additional word is given in our textbook, that is known as acoustic center. Acoustic center. What is meant by acoustic center? It is exactly opposite to this pneumotaxic center. Opposite to pneumotaxic center. That means what? The pneumotaxic center function is in this way: limits inspiration, slows wave sleep and rapid eye movement in sleep, etc. But this acoustic center controls rapid. This controls rapid eye movement, and wakefulness. In short, this pons brings about sleep and limits inspiration, and acoustic center brings about wakefulness. We wakes up from sleep, during which the rapid movement occurs, and that's why this acoustic center is opposite to this pneumotaxic center. Remember, P is silent in this word, so pronounce pneumotaxic. Pronounce pneumotaxic or acoustic center. Yeah? So that is about additional information given in our textbook. Now process. The process is known as is described by one pair of scientists known as Hering-Breuer reflex. Hering-Breuer reflex. Scientist Hering and scientist Breuer, both of them, they have described this reflex. That's why the name is given Hering-Breuer reflex. Clear? Now what this reflex tells us that? This reflex tells us that the process of regulation of breathing. How it occurs, see, during inspiration, when lung expand, inspiration. Now you know very well, lungs expands. The lungs expands and stretch receptors present on the lungs, they stimulate nerve impulse, or in another word, stretch receptor stimulates and start nerve impulse. Right? And this nerve impulse goes through the vagus nerve to expiratory center. Goes through vagus nerve to expiratory centers. Which are the expiratory centers? VRG. VRG means ventrolateral neurons. Ventrolateral neurons. So, after sending nerve impulse through this vagus nerve to the expiratory centers, they send out inhibitory impulse to inspiratory centers. Why? Because there is a stretching of lungs. So extra stretching of lungs should not occur to avoid the bursting of lung. So that's why that inhibitory impulse sent to inspiratory centers. Right? This inspiratory muscles, especially inspiratory or intercostal muscles. Now, inspiratory muscles, or you can say intercostal muscles. These intercostal muscles now relax and expiration follows. You can see here in this figure, this is thoracic cage. These are intercostal muscles. This intercostal muscle is provided with intercostal nerve. This intercostal nerve initiate nerve impulse start contraction of muscles during inspiration, and it sends to medulla oblongata, or you can say respiratory center, and the expiration follows. Right? After expiration, what happens? See, the lungs deflate. Deflates means the air from lungs is thrown out. The size of lungs becomes small, and the stretch receptors now no longer stimulates, because the stretching of lung is now totally stopped. That's why no longer stimulation occurred because of deflation or deflatation of this lungs. Right? And the new again cycle of respiration begins. New respiration begins. This is called Hering-Breuer reflex. So this reflex controls depth and rhythm of respiration and also prevents the overstretching of lungs. Clear? So that is the nervous control of regulation of breathing. Again we'll see the process. The process is described as Hering-Breuer reflex. During this reflex, what happens? During inspiration, lungs expands. The stretch receptor stimulates. The nerve impulse through vagus nerve goes to the respiratory centers, especially expiratory center present in ventral group of neurons. It sends out inhibitory impulse to inspiratory center, and the intercostal muscle now relax, and due to relaxation of this intercostal muscle, the expiration follows, and when expiration follows, the air from lung is thrown out of the body or out of the lungs, and the lungs deflate, become small. So stress receptors now no longer stimulates, and now next respiration cycle begins. And here the depth and rhythm of respiration is controlled by this Hering-Breuer reflex, and it also avoid extra stretching of lungs to avoid the bursting of lungs, and that's why such kind of neurons are present in medulla, the dorsal group and the ventral group. Clear? Now we'll go to the specific centers. Now additionally one more information is given in our textbook. This Hering-Breuer reflex is a collaboration of medulla as well as pons together, collectively known as respiratory centers. And this is involuntary process, but there are certain voluntary process also occur in breathing. Voluntary process also occur in breathing. Especially it is protective in function. How? Now this voluntary process is in collaboration with the cerebrum. This is cerebrum. Cerebrum is the part of forebrain. Most of the brain, 85% of the brain is made up of cerebrum. So this voluntary movement or voluntary process is in collaboration with the pons and medulla together and bring about voluntary breathing. Now especially when you are undergo water, for example during swimming, when you swim in water and you undergo the water, you stop your breathing voluntarily. And so that is to avoid entry of water inside our nose or inside our respiratory system. Similarly, if you are going through any hazardous gaseous region, for example air pollution, you stop your breathing voluntarily to avoid the entry of these gases inside your respiratory tract, and that's why this type of control is known as voluntary control, and it is protective in function. Clear? So here we complete nervous control. Now we'll go to the chemical control. Chemical control. Actually, in our textbook, this chemical control name is given but not explained in detail. But for our CET class, we have to learn about this chemical control. Now, this chemical control depends upon concentration of CO2 and H ions. Concentration of CO2 and H ions during inspiration, or in another word, the concentration of CO2 and H plus ions stimulates inspiration. We have studied the transport of oxygen and transport of CO2 in detail. So now you are familiar how these concentration of CO2, what is the partial pressure of CO2, how the H ion concentration is important in the transport of gases. So CO2 is most important in chemical control of breathing, but oxygen has no role has no role in regulation of breathing directly. Remember that. It is has no role on RC, respiratory center. So amount of oxygen is how much and it will impact on RC, that will not happen. So there is no role of concentration of oxygen on the respiratory centers. Remember, the chemical control occurs entirely on the CO2 and H ion concentrations actually located on located on this concentration is hampering on the receptors located on carotid artery and aortic bodies of heart. Located on the receptors located on carotid arteries and aortic bodies of heart. How? See here in the figure. This is human heart. These are the two major aortae. One is systemic aorta, another is pulmonary aorta. This, for example, systemic aorta, its wall is so thick and internally that wall contains bodies. That bodies are known as aortic bodies. Aortic bodies, both present on systemic aorta as well as pulmonary aorta. They are so sensitive for this concentration of CO2 and H ions. Another is carotid artery. Carotid artery, it is one of the branch of the systemic aorta which goes to the brain, especially from this region, neck region. So this carotid artery internally also has large bodies, and these are so sensitive for concentration of CO2 and H ions, and they recognize the change in CO2 and H ions and they bring about necessary changes or sends necessary signals to bring about necessary changes for remedial action. That means when CO2 concentration increases in blood is flowing through these arteries and aortic bodies. The concentration signals these receptors. The nerve impulse goes to brain, especially respiratory centers, and tells that there is a higher concentration of CO2. Ultimately, now start the expiration. And the next cycle after expiration takes place and removes CO2 from the body. Similarly, H ion concentration brings about more acidic condition of blood. That means pH of blood becomes more acidic and it should be neutral, almost all 7.4, slightly alkaline. So that changes also bring about by this brain, and these are called as remedial actions. So in that way, the chemical control of regulation of breathing occurs in which the heart having aortic bodies and carotid artery, they control the CO2 and H ion concentration. They recognize the concentration of CO2 and H ions, and that concentration act on the receptors located on this carotid artery and aortic bodies and bring about signal, and that signal goes to the brain and brings about necessary changes for remedial action. Clear? So that's why I have given here CO2 concentration increase in blood directly act, and nerve impulse from O2 sensors indicate decrease in oxygen. Clear? So in that way, here we complete the regulation of breathing, under which we have studied nervous control and chemical control of breathing. So study again. I will send you the multiple choice questions on this topic as well as answers of that, and we will solve the questions based on this topic. So on lung volumes, that means pulmonary volumes and lung capacities and regulation of breathing, together we will discuss the MCQs in the next video. Thank you.